Good evening, friends. Tonight, we'll drift slowly into a world where time moves differently, where the sun sets over ancient mesas and the wind carries stories older than memory itself. I'm so glad you're here with me tonight, settling into this gentle journey through history. Before we begin, I'm curious, where are you listening from tonight? And what time is it in your part of the world? Perhaps the stars are just beginning to appear through your window, or maybe the first light of dawn is still hours away. Wherever you are, whatever the hour, you're exactly where you need to be. Let me invite you now to dim your lights, or switch them off entirely if you feel comfortable doing so. Rest your head on your pillow, adjusting it until it cradles you just right. Pull your blanket a little closer, feeling its weight settle across your shoulders and chest. Allow your breathing to soften, becoming slower, deeper, more rhythmic with each gentle exhale. There's nowhere else you need to be, nothing else requiring your attention. Just this moment, this story, this slow drift toward rest. If this peaceful journey helps you unwind tonight, feel free to like and subscribe, only if it feels right to you. No pressure, no urgency. Just an invitation to join us again whenever sleep feels elusive and you need a companion through the quiet hours. Tonight, we're traveling back to a place where the rhythm of life followed the sun's arc across an endless sky, where communities carved their existence into cliffsides and mesas, where every action held meaning and every season brought its own particular gifts. We're visiting the Hopi people, not during moments of grand ceremony or dramatic change, but in the gentle, unremarkable hours that filled most of their days, the kind of hours that history books often overlook, but which held all the warmth and texture of actual living. So breathe deeply now, let your eyelids grow heavy, and allow me to carry you back through centuries, to a high desert plateau where life moved as slowly and surely as water wearing smooth the ancient stone. Let me share with you what morning felt like in a Hopi village around the year 1450, long before European ships ever touched the shores of this continent. Picture First Mesa, one of three great plateaus where the Hopi built their homes, rising from the desert floor like an island in an ocean of sand and sage. The stone pueblo sits atop this mesa, its walls the same warm ochre as the sandstone beneath it, as if the village simply grew from the rock itself rather than being built by human hands. The first person to wake is usually an older woman, a grandmother perhaps, whose body no longer requires much sleep. She rises in darkness, moving by feel and long habit through the small room where her family sleeps on woven mats. The air inside is cool but not cold. The thick adobe walls hold yesterday's warmth like a gentle embrace. She hasn't lit a lamp yet. There's no need. Her hands know exactly where everything rests. Outside, the world exists in that particular quality of pre-dawn darkness where the blackness has just begun to thin, though no light source can yet be identified. The stars are still brilliant overhead, so many of them, crowding the sky in a way that makes the modern mind, accustomed to light pollution, struggle to imagine. The Milky Way stretches overhead like spilled cornmeal across a dark blanket. She walks to the plaza, her footsteps making the softest whisper against stone worn smooth by generations of similar footsteps. In her hands, she carries a small clay bowl containing yesterday's embers, carefully preserved under a layer of ash. This is a task requiring attention but not hurry. Fire is precious, yes, but panic serves no purpose. Her breathing remains calm, steady, as regular as her footfalls. At the edge of the village, she kneels beside the fire pit, a circular space ringed with stones. She adds a handful of dried juniper bark, then a few small twigs of pinyon. The wood here is sacred in its own quiet way, not because of ceremony, but because of scarcity. Trees don't grow abundantly on these high desert mesas. Every piece of firewood represents a journey, an effort, a choice. She blows gently on the embers, her breath coaxing them to remember their warmth, to wake and eat and grow. A small flame catches, then another. Soon a modest fire breathes and crackles softly in the pre-dawn darkness, and she sits back on her heels with satisfaction. This is perhaps the most peaceful moment of the entire day. This brief window when she's the only one awake, when the fire is young and gentle, when the day's tasks haven't yet begun to unfold. She takes from the fold of her dress a small piece of piki bread, left over from yesterday's making. Piki is a paper-thin bread made from blue corn, so thin you can almost see through it, cooked on a hot stone until it becomes crisp and delicate. It's both sweet and savory at once, tasting of corn and smoke and something indefinably mineral, like the stones themselves have lent their flavor. Each sheet is rolled into a loose spiral, and when you bite into it, it crumbles and melts on your tongue almost simultaneously. The Hopi have been making piki for longer than anyone can remember, the recipe and technique passed from grandmother to granddaughter in an unbroken chain reaching back into a past so distant it becomes mythological. She chews slowly, looking east to where the horizon is just beginning to distinguish itself from the sky. Soon, perhaps in another 20 minutes, perhaps 30, the sun will appear. But not yet. For now, she simply sits, eats her small breakfast, and enjoys this quiet moment before the village wakes. Behind her, in the pueblo, others are beginning to stir. She can hear it, or rather, she can feel it, a subtle change in the quality of silence. A baby makes a soft sound, quickly soothed. Someone coughs, then falls quiet again. The village is surfacing slowly from sleep, like a diver rising through gentle water, taking time to adjust to each level before ascending further. By the time the sun's first ray strikes the top of the mesa, painting its sudden gold, several other women have emerged. They greet each other quietly, smile and nod more than words. Speech seems almost unnecessary at this hour. They gather around the fire, adding more wood now, building it larger for the work ahead. One woman begins grinding corn in a stone metate, the ancient grinding stone that's been in her family for 3 generations. The sound is rhythmic, almost musical, a soft crushing whisper as she pushes the mano, the hand stone, back and forth across the corn kernels. It's not a quick process. It takes genuine time and effort to grind corn fine enough for bread, for the thin gruel they drink, for the various dishes that form the center of Hopi life. But rush serves no purpose. The corn will become meal in its own time, and hurrying would only tire the arms unnecessarily. Another woman is checking the water situation. Water, always water. The Hopi villages sit on high mesas specifically for defense and spiritual reasons, but this choice means water must be carried up from springs at the base of the mesa, a journey of considerable effort. large ceramic alas, beautifully decorated pots, sit in the shade holding yesterday's water. She checks each one with practiced efficiency, noting what needs to be refilled, what can wait another day. It's interesting when you think about it, how so much of life revolved around resources we barely consider today. Water, fire, corn. These weren't abstract concepts or commodities purchased at markets. They were intimate companions, demanding daily attention and respect. You couldn't turn a tap and expect water to flow. You couldn't flip a switch and have light. Every comfort, every necessity required human effort, human relationship with the natural world. The grandmother who first woke is now preparing a morning drink called pikami, a blue corn pudding that's served thin and warm. She stirs it in a clay pot positioned carefully in the coals at the fire's edge. The steam rises in gentle curls, carrying the sweet, earthy scent of corn. When it's ready, she'll ladle it into smaller bowls and the family will gather, drinking it slowly, letting it warm them from the inside out. As the sun climbs higher, more people emerge. Children tumble out into the plaza, their energy already bright despite the early hour. They're not rushed off to school or activities. Instead, they'll spend the day learning through observation and participation, watching mothers grind corn and eventually trying it themselves, following fathers to the fields below the mesa, listening to stories told by elders in the long afternoon shadows. One small girl, perhaps 4 years old, stands near the fire with messy hair and sleepy eyes. Her grandmother hands her a small piece of something that looks like jerky, dried rabbit meat, seasoned with wild herbs gathered from the desert. The meat is tough, requiring serious chewing, but intensely flavorful. Game wasn't abundant here. The high desert isn't teeming with wildlife like a forest or grassland might be. So when rabbit or deer was caught, every bit was used and valued. This little scrap of meat the child is chewing represents someone's successful hunt, someone's skill with snares or arrows, someone's knowledge of animal behavior and seasonal patterns. She chews contentedly, not really awake yet, comfortable in that soft space between sleep and full consciousness. There's no alarm jarring her into alertness, no rushing, no schedule demanding adherence. She'll wake fully in her own time, and until then she simply exists in the gentle morning, chewing her breakfast, warmed by the fire and her grandmother's presence. The men are beginning to gather now, too, discussing in low voices the day's work. Fields need tending, corn, beans, squash, the three sisters that form the foundation of Hopi agriculture. It's a remarkable feat, really, growing crops here in this arid landscape where rain is sparse and unpredictable. The Hopi developed techniques over centuries, learning to work with the desert rather than against it, planting in ways that captured every precious drop of moisture, choosing locations where underground water sources came slightly closer to the surface. They'll descend the mesa soon, these men, making their way down the carved paths and natural slopes to the fields below. But not yet. First they warm themselves. First, they greet the sun and acknowledge the new day. And here's a surprising little detail from history. This leisurely morning pace wasn't unique to the Hopi or even to indigenous peoples. Throughout most of human history, across most cultures, mornings began slowly. The frantic rushing, the alarm clocks and hurried breakfasts and traffic-choked commutes. These are very modern inventions, barely a few generations old. For thousands upon thousands of years, humans woke with the sun, moved slowly into the day, ate together, talked together, prepared together for the work ahead. There's something almost radical about that now, isn't there? The idea that morning could be gentle. The grandmother rises, her knees making a small sound of protest that she ignores with long practice. She moves toward the granary, a small room built specially for storing corn. Opening it, she's greeted by the sight of dried corn ears in various colors: blue, white, yellow, red, even black. Each color has its own properties, its own best uses. Blue corn for picky and the morning pudding. White corn for hominy. Yellow corn for roasting. The colors aren't just aesthetic. They represent different varieties, developed over generations of careful seed saving and selection. She selects several ears of blue corn, running her thumb across the kernels. Hard, dry, perfect for storage. These ears might last 2 years or more if kept properly, a hedge against seasons when rain doesn't come, when the harvest disappoints. Food security wasn't about grocery stores or supply chains. It was about this, about granaries carefully stocked, about preservation techniques perfected, about planning for uncertainty. Carrying the corn back to the fire, she settles down beside a younger woman, perhaps her daughter or niece. Together they begin shelling the corn, working the kernels free from the cobs. It's companionable work, the kind that allows for conversation or comfortable silence. Their hands move steadily, practicing, accumulating a growing pile of loose kernels that will later be ground into meal. The light is fully established now, the sun well above the horizon, painting the mesa in warm tones of gold and ochre and pink. The day has truly begun. But it's begun slowly, peacefully, without urgency or stress. This is the gift of a life lived close to the land's own rhythms. Time moves differently, more naturally, in pace with the sun's arc rather than the clock's relentless ticking. And as you listen to this, feeling yourself settle deeper into your pillow, perhaps your breathing has slowed to match the pace of this ancient morning. Perhaps your thoughts are becoming softer, less insistent. Let yourself drift here, in this peaceful dawn, where nothing demands urgency and everything unfolds in its own right time. The sun has climbed higher now, and the temperature is beginning to rise in that particular way the high desert has, quickly, noticeably, the cool of morning giving way to genuine warmth. The fire in the plaza has been allowed to die back to coals. No sense maintaining a large flame when the day itself is providing heat. Several women have gathered around a large, flat stone positioned in a covered area at the plaza's edge. This is the Piki stone, and what's about to happen here is both utterly ordinary and quietly extraordinary. The making of Piki bread, that paper-thin blue corn creation I mentioned earlier. If you've never witnessed Piki being made, let me walk you slowly through the process, because there's something almost meditative about it, something that invites the mind to settle and the body to relax. First, the corn that was shelled earlier has been ground into an incredibly fine flour, much finer than most cornmeal you might encounter today. This took someone the better part of 2 hours, working steadily at the metate, pushing the mano back and forth, periodically adding a bit of water to help the grinding process. The resulting flour is almost silky, pale blue-gray, smelling sweetly of corn. This flour is mixed with water and a small amount of ash. Yes, ash from the fire. The ash serves multiple purposes. It adds trace minerals, slightly changes the flavor, and most importantly, it helps make the nutrients in the corn more bioavailable to the human body. The Hopi didn't know the chemistry involved, but they knew from centuries of experience that corn prepared this way kept people healthier. What we now call nixtamalization was practiced across Mesoamerica and up into the Southwest, a food technology developed through careful observation and intergenerational knowledge transfer. The resulting batter is thin, about the consistency of heavy cream. One woman tends the Piki stone, keeping it at exactly the right temperature, hot enough to cook the batter instantly, but not so hot it burns. She's been doing this since she was a young girl, learning by watching her mother and grandmother, and her hands know things her mind doesn't consciously track. Temperature, timing, technique, it's all embodied knowledge, muscle memory that flows without thought. She dips her hand into the bowl of batter, coating her fingers. Then, in one smooth motion, she sweeps her hand across the hot stone, leaving behind a thin film of batter that immediately begins to cook. The movement is graceful, almost like a dance step, her arm extended, fingers spread, gliding across the stone's surface. The batter sizzles very softly, not a harsh, violent sound, but a gentle whisper of moisture meeting heat. Within seconds, the edges of the thin bread begin to curl. She uses a small stick to carefully lift one edge, then peels the entire sheet free in one piece. It's translucent in places, so thin that light passes through it, and she quickly rolls it into a loose spiral before it becomes too brittle. The whole process, from batter touching stone to rolled piki, takes perhaps 15 seconds. Then she immediately begins the next sheet. Another woman sits nearby, folding and stacking the finished rolls. The smell is wonderful, sweet corn, yes, but also something smoky and mineral and warmly toasted. It's a smell that means home, that means sustenance, that means the continuation of traditions older than memory. Making piki is time-consuming and requires real skill. You can't rush it. You can't do it halfway. The stone must be properly seasoned and maintained. The batter must be exactly the right consistency. The heat must be precise. The hand movement must be confident and smooth. Anthropologists who study the Hopi estimate that a woman might spend 3 to 4 hours making piki, producing enough for perhaps 2 days' worth of family meals. It's an investment of time that modern life makes almost incomprehensible. Imagine spending half your day making a single type of bread. But here's what's beautiful about it. What's easy to miss if you're focused only on efficiency, those 3 or 4 hours aren't stolen from life. They are life. While making piki, women talk, share stories, teach younger girls, discuss concerns, and celebrate small joys. The work creates a space for community, for connection, for the transmission of culture in ways that go far beyond the mere recipe for bread. A teenage girl is practicing today under the watchful eye of an aunt. Her first few attempts are too thick, or they tear as she tries to remove them from the stone. The ant doesn't criticize, just demonstrates again, her hand moving with that practiced smoothness. "Feel the stone," she says quietly. "Let your hand know what to do." The girl tries again, and this time the sheet is a bit thinner, more even. She smiles, pleased with herself, and the ant nods approval. Nearby, a man is working on repairing a section of the pueblo wall. Adobe, mud mixed with straw and water, is the building material here, and it requires regular maintenance. Rain, wind, temperature changes, all of these gradually erode the walls, creating small gaps and cracks that need attention. He's mixing fresh adobe in a shallow pit, using his feet to combine the mud and straw, a technique that's far more efficient than using hands or tools. His feet are bare and he's folded his woven cotton pants up past his knees. The mud squishes between his toes, cool and slightly gritty. There's something almost childlike about it, isn't there? Playing in mud, letting it ooze and squelch. But it's serious work too. These walls are what stand between families and the elements, which provide shelter and safety. A wall maintained is a family protection. So he works steadily, mixing the adobe to just the right consistency, wet enough to be workable, dry enough to hold its shape. Once mixed, he begins packing the adobe into a section of wall that's eroded. He uses his hands now, scooping the mud and pressing it firmly into place, smoothing it, shaping it. It's satisfying work in its own way, the immediate visible progress, the wall literally becoming whole again under his efforts. As he works, he hums quietly, not a song with words, just a melodic line that rises and falls, keeping him company in his labor. Children are playing in the plaza, but their play isn't separate from the community's work. Several are playing a game that involves stones and throwing, developing hand-eye coordination that will serve them later in farming, hunting, and craft work. Others are imitating the adults. A small girl has a tiny matate and is grinding pebbles into cornmeal, her face serious with concentration. A boy has found a piece of broken pottery and is scraping designs into the dry earth, not so different from what his father does when planning irrigation channels. One woman is dyeing wool, working with colors derived from plants and minerals gathered from the surrounding landscape. She has several skeins of wool soaking in clay pots, each pot containing a different dye. One holds a red dye made from crushed amaranth seeds. Another contains a yellow dye from rabbit brush flowers. A third has a rich brown from walnut hulls traded from tribes living in regions where walnut trees grow. The Hopi themselves don't have walnut trees on the mesa, but trade networks stretched across remarkable distances, connecting communities separated by hundreds of miles. The wool itself comes from sheep, which the Hopi adopted from Spanish colonizers in the 1600s. Before sheep, they worked primarily with cotton, which they grew in sheltered locations and wove into fabric. But sheep were so useful, providing wool for weaving and meat for eating, that they were quickly integrated into Hopi life. It's a reminder that cultures aren't static, frozen in time. They adapt, they incorporate new elements, they evolve while still maintaining core identities and practices. She lifts one skein from the red dye pot, wringing it out gently to check the color. Not quite dark enough yet. She lowers it back into the liquid, stirring slowly with a stick. Like so much here, dyeing is a practice that requires patience. The wool takes its time absorbing the color, and rushing accomplishes nothing except wasted materials and inferior results. A small boy approaches her, carrying something cupped in his hands. "Grandmother, look," he says, opening his hands to reveal a horned lizard, sometimes called a horny toad, though it's actually a lizard. The creature sits calmly in the child's palm, looking prehistoric with its flat, spiky body and stubby tail. She smiles. "Ah, you found a guardian of the ants," she says. "They eat many ants, these little ones. Very helpful creatures." The boy studies the lizard with fascination. "Can I keep it?" "Best to let it return to its work," she says gently. "It has a family waiting just as you do, and the ants won't guard themselves." He considers this, then nods and carefully sets the lizard down at the plaza's edge. It scurries away with surprising speed for such a squat animal, disappearing into a crack between stones. This exchange, so small and ordinary, contains within it an entire worldview, one where humans aren't separate from nature but part of it, where even tiny lizards have roles and purposes, where taking from the natural world is done thoughtfully, with consideration for consequences and balance. The morning is wearing on toward midday now, and someone has brought out a bowl of tuma, a savory dish made from hominy corn and juniper ash. Hominy is corn that's been treated with alkali, again, that ash making an appearance, which removes the hull and causes the kernels to puff up slightly. It's then dried and can be stored for long periods. To prepare it for eating, it's boiled with water until tender, creating something with a texture almost like beans, but with corn's distinctive flavor made somehow deeper, more complex. Seasoned with wild onions and a bit of dried meat, tuma is hearty and satisfying. It's the kind of food that sticks with you, that provides sustained energy for long hours of physical work. The bowl is passed around, people taking portions with their fingers, eating slowly, savoring both the food and the brief rest. And here's a funny little historical footnote. Hominy, which originated with indigenous peoples of the Americas, eventually made its way around the world through colonization and trade. It became pozole in Mexico, grits in the American South, and even influenced dishes as far away as Italy. Food, perhaps more than almost anything else, demonstrates how connected human cultures truly are, how ideas and ingredients flow across borders and time periods, how something developed on a mesa in what would become Arizona could eventually influence cooking in Rome or Rio de Janeiro. But those global journeys are far in the future. Here, now, in this eternal mid-morning, hominy is simply breakfast's heartier companion, a food that means sustenance and continuity, that connects today's meal to meals eaten by ancestors stretching back generations upon generations. The man working on the wall has finished his repairs and is now sitting in the shade, drinking water from a clay cup. His feet are still muddy, but the adobe is drying in the sun, already beginning its transformation from wet mud to solid wall. Tomorrow, or perhaps the next day, someone will apply a thin layer of fine clay as a finish coat, smoothing and sealing the repair until it's nearly invisible, just another part of the whole. And everything continues, the way it has continued for centuries. Work and rest, food and water, maintenance and creation, teaching and learning, all flowing together in a rhythm that feels almost timeless. Let that rhythm carry you deeper now, your breath slowing to match the pace of this unhurried day, your thoughts drifting like clouds across the mesa's endless sky. As the sun reaches its peak, the plaza largely empties. This is the time when the heat becomes serious, when even the high desert's usually dry air feels thick and pressing. The smart thing, the thing that centuries of experience have taught, is to rest during these hours, to seek shade and stillness and wait for the temperature to become more forgiving. Inside the pueblo, in the cool dimness of adobe rooms, families rest together. The thick walls, sometimes 3 feet deep, provide remarkable insulation. Heat takes time to penetrate them, and by the time the outside walls are warm to the touch, the day is already beginning to cool again. Its architecture is perfectly suited to its environment, developed not by architects with degrees but by people living intimately with their surroundings, learning from each season what worked and what didn't, adjusting and improving over generations. In one room, a man lies on a woven mat, not quite sleeping but not fully awake either, existing in that pleasant space between states. His wife sits nearby, working on a basket. The basket is made from rabbit brush and yucca leaves, materials gathered on walks through the surrounding desert. She's been working on this particular basket for 3 weeks, adding to it when time and inclination align. The technique is called coiling. She builds the basket in a spiral, each row wrapped and sewn to the one before it, gradually creating the circular shape. Her stitches are tiny, precise, invisible to the casual eye. The basket will be watertight when finished, capable of holding even liquids despite being made entirely of plant fibers. This isn't magic, it's skill and knowledge, the stitches so tight that water can't find a way through. As she works, she thinks about her daughter, who's visiting another village with her new husband. Marriage among the Hopi is matrilineal and matrilocal. Property and clan membership pass through the mother's line, and typically men move to their wife's home after marriage. But there's flexibility too, visits and exchanges, the social fabric woven as carefully as any basket. Her fingers move steadily, pulling the yucca fiber through, wrapping the next coil of rabbit brush. The motion is repetitive but not boring. Each stitch is slightly different, requiring small adjustments, tiny decisions. It's the kind of work that occupies the hands while leaving the mind free to wander, to think, to rest in its own way. Outside, a few people have remained in the plaza despite the heat. A man sits in the shadow of a wall, working on a length of wood with a knife made from volcanic glass. He's carving a prayer stick, a pehos, which will be used in the ceremony. The stick is about 8 inches long, willow wood painted with symbolic colors and designs. Attached to it will be a small bundle of feathers, specific birds chosen for specific meanings. He works slowly, carefully. This isn't something to rush. The pehos will carry prayers, intentions, requests to the spirits and kachinas that populate the Hopi spiritual world. Every cut matters, every painted line holds significance. He's been making pehos since he was initiated into the men's religious society as a young teenager, taught by his uncles and older cousins, learning not just the physical techniques but the proper prayers, the correct attitudes, the spiritual framework that makes a pehose more than just a painted stick. It's hard, sometimes, to convey to modern minds what religion meant in a culture like this. Not something separate from daily life, not an hour on Sunday morning, but woven into everything. The planting of corn is a religious act. The painting of pottery is a religious act. The raising of children, the hunting of rabbits, the grinding of meal, all of it connected to larger meanings, to stories of emergence and migration, to relationships with the natural and spiritual worlds. But even within that framework, there's room for the ordinary, for the quiet moments that are just moments, without grand significance. A man carving in the shade, feeling the wood part under his blade, working slowly because the afternoon heat makes everything slow. A dog lies nearby, panting softly in the shade. Dogs have been companions to humans here for thousands of years, descended from animals domesticated so far back that the origin story is lost to time. This particular dog is yellowish-brown, medium-sized, with alert ears and intelligent eyes currently half-closed in the heat. It's not really a pet in the modern sense. It works, hunting and helping and serving as a watchful guardian, but it's also clearly a companion, comfortable in the human spaces, familiar with the rhythms of village life. One of the women emerges from her home, carrying a small ceramic bowl. She's been soaking beans, tepary beans, a variety native to this region, small and tan and remarkably drought-resistant. These beans can grow with minimal water, making them perfectly suited to agriculture in this arid landscape. She's going to cook them now, slowly, in a pot positioned at the edge of a small fire she's built specifically for this purpose. She adds water to the pot, drops in the beans, then tucks wild onion and a dried chili pepper among them. The chili isn't particularly hot, it's a mild variety, therefore for flavor more than heat. Then she settles the pot into the coals and sits back to wait. Beans take time. There's no rushing them. They'll soften in their own time, absorbing the water, breaking down their starches, becoming tender and nourishing. As she waits, she nibbles on something surprising: dried grasshoppers, toasted with salt. Now, I know what you might be thinking. Grasshoppers? For eating? But stay with me here. Grasshoppers and insects generally were an important protein source for many indigenous peoples. They're actually quite nutritious, high in protein, low in fat, and when properly prepared, they have a nutty, slightly crunchy taste not entirely unlike roasted pumpkin seeds. These particular grasshoppers were caught during a swarm that passed through a few weeks earlier. When grasshoppers swarm in large numbers, they're easy to collect in baskets and nets. Toasted immediately to preserve them, they can be stored for months, providing protein during seasons when hunting might be less productive. They're also, in a practical sense, a form of crop protection. Better to eat the grasshoppers than let them eat your corn. She crunches one thoughtfully, watching the beans begin to bubble gently in their pot. The dog raises its head hopefully, and she tosses it a grasshopper, which it catches and eats with evident satisfaction. Even dogs appreciate a good crunchy snack. The afternoon stretches on, languid and slow. Time here doesn't move in the sharp increments of clock hours. It moves with the sun's position, the length of shadows, the feeling of heat giving way gradually to something more comfortable. It's a different relationship with time, one that's difficult to maintain in the modern world with its schedules and deadlines and digital clocks marking every passing second. But here, now, in this story, time is generous. It doesn't hurry. It allows for rest, for slow work, for sitting in the shade with a bowl of beans bubbling nearby and a dog at your feet. Another man appears, returning from the fields below. He's been checking on the corn, walking among the rows, noting which plants need more earth mounded around their bases, which areas might benefit from the placement of another windbreak. He carries a few ears of corn with him, not fully ripe yet, but mature enough to roast. These are a treat, sweet corn eaten fresh rather than dried and ground. He brings the corn to the fire and positions the ears directly in the coals, still in their husks. The husks will char but protect the kernels inside, steaming them in their own moisture. The smell as they cook is incredible, sweet and smoky and somehow quintessentially summer, despite the season being late summer heading toward fall. Others are drawn by the smell, emerging from their afternoon rest. Children come first, as they always do when food appears, clustering around the fire with bright, hopeful faces. He smiles, turning the ears with a stick, making them wait just a little longer, building anticipation. Finally, he judges them ready and pulls them from the coals using 2 sticks as tongs. The husks are blackened, smoking slightly. He peels one open carefully, revealing the bright yellow kernels inside, steaming and tender. He passes the ear to the nearest child, who immediately bites into it, heedless of the heat, making happy noises of approval. He prepares more ears, passing them around. The kernels are sweet and milky, bursting with flavor, entirely different from the dried corn that makes up most of the year's meals. This is seasonal eating in its purest form, a treat available only for a brief window, cherished precisely because it's temporary. An elder joins the group, moving slowly, leaning on a walking stick. He's offered an ear of corn and takes it with a nod of thanks. His teeth aren't what they once were, so he scrapes the kernels off with a knife, eating them more slowly than the children, but with no less appreciation. This elder has stories, so many stories. He's seen perhaps 70 summers, maybe more. He can remember times of drought and times of abundance, conflicts and resolutions, births and deaths, the whole turning wheel of life in this small community. Later, as evening comes, people will probably ask him to share a story, and he will, but for now he simply eats his corn and enjoys the afternoon's slow unwinding. The woman tending the beans checks them, fishing one out with a wooden spoon and squeezing it between her fingers. Almost ready, but not quite. She adds a bit more water and settles them back into the coals. Patience. Everything here teaches patience. A young girl is grinding something with a small mango and meat, not corn, but wild seeds gathered from grasses. These seeds will be mixed with piñon nuts and a bit of dried fruit to make small cakes, a concentrated food good for traveling. Her grandmother is teaching her the proper technique, the angle to hold the mano, the rhythm of the motion. Like water flowing, her grandmother says, not fighting the stone, but working with it. The girl tries to find the rhythm, her movements still a bit jerky, uncertain. But she's learning, and her grandmother is patient, offering small corrections, occasional demonstrations, mostly just watching and letting the girl's muscles learn through repetition. And here's something worth noting. Education in this society isn't separated from life. There are no schools in the sense we understand them. Learning happens through doing, through observation, through participation in the actual work of the community. A girl learns to grind corn by grinding corn, learns to make baskets by making baskets, learns to be a woman by watching and helping and gradually taking on more responsibility. It's not a perfect system, no system is, but it has the advantage of context. Everything learned has immediate, visible application. The connection between effort and outcome is direct and clear. And perhaps more importantly, learning is embedded in relationships. You're not being taught by a stranger in a classroom, but by your grandmother, your aunt, your mother, people who love you and have a vested interest in your success. The afternoon is beginning its slow transition toward evening now. The heat is easing, becoming bearable, then comfortable. Shadows are lengthening, reaching across the plaza like gentle fingers. The quality of light is changing, the harsh white brilliance of midday softening into warmer, more golden tones. People are gradually returning to activity, emerging from rest, ready for the evening's work and social time. The beans are finally tender, and the woman spoons them into a larger bowl where they'll be available for anyone who's hungry. Food in this culture isn't hoarded. It's shared, part of the social fabric that binds the community together. And as you listen to all of this, perhaps you're noticing how deeply relaxed you've become, how your body has settled into your mattress, how your breathing has slowed, how thoughts are drifting rather than demanding attention. Let yourself float here, in this long afternoon, where time is generous and nothing requires rushing. The sun is lowering now toward the western horizon, and with its descent comes that particular quality of light that photographers call the golden hour. Everything is painted in warm, honeyed tones. The sandstone mesa glows almost pink, the adobe walls seem to hold light within themselves, and even the shadows are soft-edged and gentle rather than harsh. People are gathering in the plaza again, drawn out by the comfortable temperature and the natural social rhythm of the evening. This is when the day's work is largely done but bedtime is still hours away. A space for community, for sharing, for the maintenance of social bonds that are as important to survival as water and corn. Several women are working together on a large cooking project, making a stew in a ceramic pot so big it requires 2 people to lift when full. The pot itself is a work of art, decorated with geometric designs in black and red against a cream background. It was made by one of the women's grandmothers, decades ago, shaped from clay gathered at a specific location known for its quality, fired in an outdoor pit, and used regularly ever since. Into this pot go many things. Chunks of rabbit meat, saved from several successful hunts. Dried corn kernels, which will soften as they cook. Squash, cut into cubes, bright yellow-orange against the other ingredients. Beans from earlier. Wild onions. Dried chilies. A handful of wild greens that someone gathered yesterday. Water from the precious stores brought up from the spring. The pot is positioned over a fire built specifically for cooking, not too hot but steady, consistent. One woman stirs occasionally with a long wooden spoon, checking the consistency, adjusting as needed. The smell that rises from the pot is complex and deeply savory, the kind of smell that makes everyone nearby stop and inhale appreciatively. Cooking like this is inherently communal. The pot is too large for one family. It's going to feed many people. There's no formal arrangement about who contributes what or how the food will be divided. That's just understood, part of the social contract that makes village life work. You share what you have. You trust that others will do the same. Over time, over the course of seasons and years, it balances out. A man returns from hunting, carrying 2 rabbits. He didn't go far, maybe an hour's walk from the village, and he used a throwing stick rather than bow and arrows. The throwing stick is a simple technology, essentially a flat, curved piece of wood that's hurled at prey with a snapping overhand motion. In skilled hands, it's devastatingly effective at the distances rabbits allow before fleeing. He presents the rabbits to his wife, who accepts them with thanks. They'll be skinned and butchered, the meat dried or cooked, the fur saved for winter clothing or blankets. Rabbit fur is wonderfully warm when woven or bundled together, and nothing goes to waste. Even the bones will be cracked for marrow or saved for tools. Children are playing a game that involves a ball made of twisted yucca fiber and 2 goals marked by stones at opposite ends of the plaza. The rules seem fluid, changing through negotiation and argument, but the game is energetic and clearly fun. They run and shout and laugh, burning off the energy that rest and food have restored. One boy, perhaps 8 years old, is extraordinarily quick. He dodges between other players, scoops up the ball, and races toward a goal. Others chase him, nearly catching him several times, but he's slippery, changing direction with impressive agility. He scores, his team cheers. The other team protests that some rule was violated. Negotiations ensue. Eventually, play resumes. This is childhood, recognizable across cultures and centuries. The games change, but the essential experience remains constant. An old woman is teaching a group of girls a song. It's in Hopi, which is a language unlike any other, not related to surrounding tribal languages, somewhat isolated linguistically, which has led to speculation about the deep antiquity of Hopi presence in this region. The song is about butterflies and corn, 2 things intimately connected in Hopi thought. Butterflies are pollinators, necessary for corn to produce kernels. They're also beautiful, ephemeral, transformative. They begin as one thing and become something entirely different. These layers of meaning are woven into the song, though the girls learning it might not fully grasp all the significance yet. That understanding will come gradually, deepening over years. The melody is simple but lovely, with a repetitive structure that makes it easy to learn. The girls sing it back to the old woman, stumbling over a few words, giggling when they make mistakes. She corrects them gently, singing the difficult parts again, encouraging them. Her voice, aged and thin but still tuneful, carries across the plaza, and others hum along, remembering the song from their own childhoods. Now, here's a little historical detail that surprises many people. Music among indigenous peoples of the Southwest was incredibly sophisticated. Songs could be enormously complex, with intricate rhythms and melodic structures, containing information, history, spiritual knowledge, and cultural values all encoded in musical form. Some songs were owned by specific individuals or societies, not sung casually but only in appropriate contexts. Others were communal property, taught freely, part of the common cultural inheritance. The light is fading now, the sun having slipped below the horizon, leaving behind a sky painted in layers, pink and orange near the horizon, shading through purple to deep blue overhead. The first stars are becoming visible, pinpricks of light against the darkening dome of sky. The fire in the plaza is built up again, now more for light and social gathering than for cooking. People arrange themselves in its glow, continuing their conversations, enjoying the comfortable evening. A baby fusses and is passed to its mother, who settles it at her breast, nursing while continuing to talk with the women around her. Nursing is unremarkable here, as natural as eating or breathing, not hidden or considered inappropriate. A group of men are discussing plans for a hunting trip, multiple days away from the village, tracking deer in the mountains visible in the distance. They'll need to prepare carefully, bringing enough food, good weapons, and warm clothing for cold mountain nights. The discussion is detailed, practical, each man contributing knowledge and suggestions. And weaving through everything, the conversations, the baby's small sounds, the crackle of the fire, the distant yipping of coyotes somewhere out in the dark desert, is a profound sense of continuity. This scene, with minor variations, has played out thousands upon thousands of times. Ancestral Puebloans, the people who came before the Hopi in this region, gathered around fires on mesa tops centuries before tonight. And their ancestors before them. And on back through time, humans sitting together in the dark, keeping the night at bay with fire and companionship and shared stories. You're part of that long chain too, listening to this story, connected through imagination to these ancient evenings. Let yourself sink deeper into that connection, your breath slow and steady, your body completely relaxed, held safely by your bed as these people were held by their community. True darkness has settled over the mesa now, the kind of darkness that's becoming increasingly rare in the modern world with its light pollution and endless electric illumination. Here, night means something. The stars aren't dim suggestions but brilliant, numerous beyond counting, spread across the sky in a glorious display that makes the vastness of the universe feel both overwhelming and strangely intimate. The fire in the plaza has become the center of the visible world. Its light creates a warm circle of illumination, and beyond that circle, darkness pools thick and soft. Eyes adjust to the dimness, and gradually the moon, nearly full tonight, begins to assert itself, adding its silver light to the scene. The mesa's edges become visible again, dark shapes against a slightly less dark sky. Most of the children have been taken inside to sleep. Their days started early and involved considerable physical activity. They're tired in that good, natural way that makes sleep come easily. Inside adobe homes, parents settle them on woven mats, covering them with blankets made from rabbit fur or cotton, depending on the season and the family's resources. One mother sits beside her young son, singing a quiet lullaby. The words are simple, something about clouds and rain and corn growing tall. Her voice is soft, barely above a whisper, and the boy's eyes are already heavy. Within minutes, he's asleep, his breathing deepening, his body going completely slack in the way only deeply sleeping children can manage. She sits there a moment longer, watching him sleep, feeling that complex mix of love and responsibility and fierce protectiveness that parenthood brings. Then she rises carefully, quietly, and returns to the plaza where her friends are still gathered. The adults remaining by the fire have shifted to quieter, more reflective conversation. The energy of earlier evenings, the active play, the communal meal, the storytelling, has given way to something more subdued. Several people are working on small tasks that don't require good light. A woman braiding her daughter's hair, a man checking the edge on a knife, another woman shelling a few remaining ears of corn. One elder is smoking a pipe, small puffs of smoke rising into the dark air and disappearing. The tobacco isn't the same type that would become commercially popular later. This is wild tobacco, strong and harsh, mixed with other herbs to make it slightly less aggressive. Smoking serves ceremonial purposes in many contexts, but right now, in this casual evening setting, it's simply a pleasure, a quiet enjoyment. A young man is telling a story about something that happened to him earlier in the day. He went down to the spring to collect water and encountered a rattlesnake on the path. I didn't see it at first, he says. I was thinking about other things, not paying attention. Then I heard it, that sound, you know? Everyone knows. The dry rattle of a rattlesnake's tail is unmistakable once you've heard it. It's a sound that triggers instant alertness, instant caution. I stopped immediately, he continues. It was right there, coiled beside the path, watching me. Beautiful snake, really. The patterns on its back, the way it held itself, so calm, so completely confident. Someone asks what he did. I waited. Stepped back a bit. We looked at each other. After a while, it decided I wasn't a threat and moved off the path into the rocks. Then I continued to the spring. He pauses. I left a small offering there, cornmeal, thanking it for not striking, acknowledging its presence. This story, so simple, reveals layers of how the Hopi relate to their environment. The snake isn't an enemy to be killed. It's another being, living its life, deserving of respect. The encounter is significant enough to mention but isn't dramatized into something heroic. And the offering of cornmeal is a small gesture maintaining balance, acknowledging the interconnection of all beings. A woman mentions that she'll be making pottery tomorrow, and there's a brief discussion about clay sources. Different locations yield clay with different properties, some better for cooking pots that will withstand heat, some better for water jars, some best for ceremonial items. She's planning to make a large water jar, which requires particularly good clay and considerable skill. A poorly made water jar might crack, wasting all the effort of creation. So she'll gather clay from the spot her mother taught her about, the place where clay is fine and plastic, perfect for large vessels. Someone else is planning to work on repairing sandals. Sandals here are woven from yucca fiber, sturdy but not indestructible. They wear out, especially the soles, and require periodic repair or replacement. It's finicky work, requiring good light, so it's been postponed until tomorrow morning. But talking about it now, making the plan, is part of the process. The conversation meanders, topics flowing naturally from one to the next without force or agenda. This is social time, valuable in its own right, not needing to accomplish anything beyond the maintenance of connection and community. One person produces a small bag of pinyon nuts, cracking them open with a stone and sharing the nut meats around. Pinyon nuts are harvested from pinyon pines, gathered in fall when the cones ripen. It's labor-intensive work, climbing trees or gathering from the ground where squirrels have already harvested them, then extracting the small nuts from the sticky cones, then cracking each individual shell to get at the tiny kernel inside. But the flavor makes the effort worthwhile. Pinyon nuts are rich and buttery, with a distinctive taste that's slightly sweet, slightly resinous. They're full of fat and protein, incredibly nutritious, and they can be stored for months if kept dry. They were, and are, a valuable food source for people throughout the Southwest. As people crack nuts and talk, the night deepens around them. The fire burns lower, becoming a bed of glowing coals rather than dancing flames. Someone adds a few more pieces of wood, not building it back up to full height but keeping it alive, maintaining the light and warmth. Far off in the darkness, a coyote howls, that distinctive sound that starts low and rises into a complex series of yips and howls. Another coyote answers from a different direction, then another. Soon there's a whole conversation happening out there in the dark, coyotes communicating in ways that humans can only partially understand. They found something, someone observes. Hunting together. Coyotes are clever, adaptable hunters. They'll take rabbits, ground squirrels, even insects and fruit when meat is scarce. They're survivors, perfectly suited to the desert's challenges. The Hopi have a complex relationship with coyotes. There's respect for their intelligence and adaptability, amusement at their often comical behavior, and wariness of their tendency to steal chickens if given the opportunity. All of this is bundled together in the figure of Coyote in stories, that trickster character who's foolish and clever simultaneously, who makes mistakes but always survives. A man mentions that he saw unusually good tracks near one of the cornfields, suggesting rabbits are moving through regularly. He's thinking about setting snares there, not now, but in a few days, giving the rabbits time to establish a pattern. Hunting is often as much about patience and observation as about the actual moment of the kill. Understanding animal behavior, predicting movements, being in the right place at the right time. These are the skills that separate successful hunters from unsuccessful ones. The conversation is getting quieter now, energy winding down. A few people excuse themselves, heading home to sleep. Others remain, not quite ready to end the day but no longer actively conversing, simply sitting together in companionable silence, watching the fire, listening to the night. And the night has its own sounds, once you stop talking and truly listen. The wind, always present on the mesa, makes its soft rushing sound. Insects create a subtle background hum, crickets and other small creatures going about their nocturnal business. Somewhere, an owl calls, a low hooting that carries across the darkness. These sounds aren't random noise, they're the voice of the living world, the ongoing activity that continues whether humans pay attention or not. One old woman remains by the fire after almost everyone else has left. She's not sleeping well these days, a common affliction of age, so she often stays up late, keeping the fire company, giving the night its due. She produces a small bundle of herbs from her clothing and crumbles some into the coals. A sweet, slightly pungent smoke rises, sage, probably, or something similar. The smoke is cleansing, spiritually and practically. It smells good, and it helps keep insects away. She sits there, an old woman by a dying fire under a sky full of stars, and she's content. Her life has been long, full of the usual mix of joy and sorrow, success and failure. She's raised children who raised their own children. She's seen droughts end and return. She's learned skills and taught them to others. She's been part of something larger than herself. This community, this way of life, this long chain of humans living on these mesas, adapting to the desert's demands, finding ways to thrive where thriving seems unlikely. Eventually, even she decides it's time to sleep. She makes sure the fire is safe, not completely extinguished, because embers will be wanted in the morning, but contained and calm, not likely to spread or cause problems. Then she rises stiffly, feeling her knees protest, and makes her way slowly to her home. Inside, it's very dark and very quiet. Her family members are all asleep, their breathing creating a gentle rhythm. She settles onto her mat, pulling a blanket over herself, and within minutes, she too is asleep, joining the rest of the village in that necessary nightly surrender to rest. And the mesa settles into deep night, that long quiet period between sunset and sunrise when humans mostly withdraw, leaving the landscape to the creatures who prefer darkness. The plaza is empty now except for the fire, still glowing softly. The stars will slowly overhead in their ancient patterns. The moon climbs higher, painting everything in silver and shadow. Let yourself join them now, these sleepers on the mesa, your body as relaxed as theirs, your breathing as deep and slow, your mind releasing its hold on waking thoughts and drifting into the formless space where sleep begins. The hours between midnight and dawn have their own particular quality, a depth of darkness and silence that feels almost sacred. The pueblo is dark now, the fire reduced to the faintest glow, barely visible. Inside adobe homes, families sleep, each person lost in their own dreams, each breath contributing to the collective rise and fall that marks living creatures at rest. But sleep in this time and place isn't the same as sleep in our modern world. There are no alarm clocks waiting to jar people awake at predetermined times. There's no artificial light bleeding through windows from street lamps or neighbors' houses. There's no hum of electronics, no notification sounds, no ambient noise of traffic or machinery. The darkness is complete. The silence is profound. In this environment, sleep comes in natural cycles. People wake periodically through the night. This is human nature, the way our bodies actually work when freed from modern interventions. But these wakings aren't alarming. They're gentle, brief. A person might wake, adjust their position, note the darkness and quiet, and slip back into sleep within moments. Or they might lie awake a short while, thinking slow thoughts, remembering dreams, listening to the night. One man wakes needing to relieve himself. He rises carefully, trying not to disturb his wife sleeping beside him. Outside, the cold of the desert night is striking. Temperatures drop dramatically once the sun sets, the dry air unable to hold heat. He walks to the designated area at the village's edge, does what he needs to do, and stands there a moment looking at the stars. They're breathtaking. The Milky Way is a river of light overhead, so dense with stars that it appears almost solid in places. He identifies patterns, constellations that his people have named and tracked for generations. That's the pattern they call the seeds, marking the time for planting. And the hunter, visible now in these autumn months. The stars are calendar, map, story, and inspiration all at once. He thinks about his son, sleeping inside, and feels a wave of tenderness. The boy is learning well, paying attention, already showing signs of becoming a skilled farmer. Today, really, since dawn isn't that far off, they'll go to the fields together, and he'll teach his son about reading the corn plants, understanding what they need by observing their leaves and stalks. Knowledge passed from father to son, generation to generation, keeping the chain unbroken. After a few minutes, the cold drives him back inside. He settles onto his mat, pulls the blanket close, and sleep reclaims him quickly. Elsewhere in the village, a baby wakes and fusses. The mother wakes immediately. Mothers develop this capacity, this ability to respond to their child's smallest sound while sleeping through other noises. She lifts the baby, offers her breast, and the baby nurses back into sleep while she remains in that half-wakeful state mothers know, aware enough to care for the child but not so awake that sleep becomes impossible. When the baby is settled again, she continues lying awake, just for a little while. She thinks about the basket she's weaving, working out in her mind the pattern she wants to create, planning the next few rows. Then that thought drifts away and she thinks about her sister, who lives in a neighboring village and might visit soon. Then that too drifts away, and she sinks back into sleep, her arm around her baby, both of them warm beneath their blanket. A dog barks once, somewhere in the village. Then silence returns. Whatever disturbance prompted the bark, a mouse, perhaps, or a passing fox, is gone or deemed unimportant. The dog settles back down, curling tighter into itself for warmth. The moon is setting now, sliding down toward the western horizon, and the darkness deepens even further. This is the darkest part of night, when the moon has set but the sun hasn't yet begun its return. In this darkness, vision becomes almost useless. The world is reduced to sound and touch, to the feeling of cold air and the rustling of wind and the vast empty presence of the desert stretching away in all directions. But it's not frightening, this darkness. Not to people who've known it their whole lives, who've never experienced anything different. It's simply night, doing what night does, providing rest and renewal, giving the world a chance to pause between one day and the next. In the kiva, the ceremonial room built partially underground, a man keeps vigil. This is part of his religious duty, his role in one of the men's societies. He's not alone. Several others are with him, maintaining a ceremony that's been ongoing for several days. They're preparing for a dance that will happen soon, when the preparations are complete and the time is right. The kiva is dark except for a small fire, just enough light to see by. The air is thick with smoke from the fire and from the pipes the men have been smoking. They're not constantly active. Much of religious practice involves waiting, sitting, maintaining presence. They talk occasionally, quietly, but mostly they simply sit, each man with his own thoughts, his own prayers, his own relationship with the spirits and forces they're engaging through this ceremony. One is grinding something in a small bowl, minerals for paint that will be used in the decoration of masks and prayer sticks. The sound of the grinding is rhythmic, soothing, almost meditative. Another is working on a mask, attaching feathers, adjusting the fit, checking details. These items aren't decorations or art in the way museums might display them. They're tools for spiritual work, as important and functional as a farmer's hoe or a hunter's bow. The night deepens around them, but in the kiva, time feels suspended. They're in a liminal space between worlds in a sense, focused on the sacred rather than the ordinary. When they emerge tomorrow, or whenever the ceremony concludes, they'll return to regular life, but for now, they exist in this separate space, doing this necessary work. Above ground, the wind picks up slightly. Not a storm, just the desert night wind, that common phenomenon where temperature differences create air movement. It whispers around the pueblo's corners, finding gaps and cracks, singing its quiet song. Inside, sleeping people pull blankets closer, perhaps dreaming of wind, of flight, of movement through vast spaces. An old man lies awake on his mat, knowing sleep is finished for him tonight. This happens sometimes. Sleep comes in two parts, a few hours after dusk and a few hours before dawn, with a period of wakefulness in between. It's actually a natural human sleep pattern, interrupted sleep, common before the industrial age forced everyone into single consolidated sleep periods. He doesn't fight it. Instead, he simply lies there thinking about his life, reviewing memories. He thinks about his wife, dead now for 5 years, and smiles at remembered moments. Her laugh, her exasperation when he tracked mud into the house, her gentle competence with children and crops and all the practical matters of living. He misses her, but the pain has dulled to something softer, a sweet sadness rather than sharp grief. He thinks about his grandchildren, and his face crinkles with pleasure even in the darkness. They're good children, respectful and curious, learning the ways they need to know. He's been teaching the oldest boy about stars, showing him the patterns and the stories, making sure this knowledge continues forward. The boy learns quickly, remembers well. The knowledge will survive. After a while, he feels sleepiness returning. He shifts position, gets comfortable, and allows himself to drift. His breathing slows, deepens, and he's gone again, back into sleep, perhaps to dream of stars or his wife or the cornfields where he's worked his whole life. The darkness begins, almost imperceptibly, to thin. It's still hours before sunrise, but something changes, some quality in the air, some shift that signals night's peak has passed and the world is beginning its slow turn back toward light. No human eye could consciously detect it yet, but bodies know, circadian rhythms respond, preparation for waking begins deep in sleeping brains. In the plaza, the embers of last night's fire still hold the faintest warmth. Come dawn, someone will wake them fully, nurse them back to flame, and begin the whole daily cycle again. But for now they rest, glowing so dimly they're barely visible, waiting. A shooting star streaks across the sky, brilliant and brief. No one sees it. The moment comes and goes, as countless such moments do, witnessed only by the desert itself, by the patient stones and the sleeping village and the vast sky overhead. Everything is quiet. Everything is still. The mesa exists in that perfect balance point between night and day, that moment of deepest rest before activity begins again. And perhaps you've found that balance too, listening to this story, your body completely relaxed, your breathing so slow and steady, your mind released from its usual concerns and drifting free, suspended in that pleasant space where sleep waits to receive you fully. There's nowhere else to be. Nothing else that needs your attention. Just this moment, this deep rest, this gentle story carrying you further into sleep with each word, each breath, each soft heartbeat. The Hopi sleep peacefully on their mesa, as their ancestors slept, as their descendants will sleep, part of that long unbroken chain of humans finding rest and renewal in the darkness, trusting that dawn will come, that corn will grow, that life will continue in its ancient rhythms. And you can sleep peacefully too, here in your own time and place, carried by this story into deep, restorative rest. Let go of everything now. Let yourself sink completely into the softness of your bed, the comfort of your blanket, the peaceful darkness of your room. Sleep now. Sleep deeply. Sleep well. Thank you for traveling through this gentle piece of history with me tonight, for stepping into the quiet rhythm of life on an ancient mesa, for allowing yourself to slow down to the pace of corn growing and fires crackling and stars wheeling overhead. The Hopi people still exist, of course. They're not vanished into history but living communities continuing their traditions, adapting to modern times while maintaining connections to their ancestors and their land. Their story didn't end with these quiet days I've described. It continues, complex and ongoing, like all living cultures. But tonight, we visited a particular kind of time, a particular quality of existence, slow, connected, rooted in place and season and community. We remembered that human life doesn't have to be rushed, that there's value in the ordinary, that the daily rituals of eating and working and gathering together hold their own form of meaning. I hope this journey gave you some measure of peace, helped quiet the busy thoughts that sometimes keep us from resting, reminded you that you're part of something larger, a long chain of humans who've watched stars and warmed themselves by fires and told stories in the darkness. If you drifted into peaceful sleep somewhere along the way, I'm glad I could be that companion for you tonight. And if you made it all the way to this ending, still awake but feeling relaxed and ready for rest, then I hope sleep finds you easily now, carrying you gently into dreams. If this story helped you unwind, if you'd like more journeys like this one, let me know in the comments below. Tell me where you're listening from, what time of night or day it is for you, what other corners of history you'd like to explore in this slow, soothing way. For now, though, there's nothing more to do. Just close your eyes if they're still open. Settle a little deeper into your pillow. Let your breathing soften even more. Release any remaining tension in your shoulders, your jaw, your hands. Sweet dreams, friends. May your sleep be deep and peaceful, your dreams gentle, and may you wake tomorrow refreshed and renewed. Sleep well. Sleep soft, sleep deep. Good night.